Hi, everyone, and welcome back to our SSE podcast. I'm Zoo, your host. Today we have Ashley. Ashley is a Stratfin manager at Affirm, and I'll let herself introduce herself.
Thanks, Sue. I'm Ashley. I am a staffing manager over at Affirm. We are in the fintech space. You might have heard of us before. We work in the BNPL space, and we work across a variety of different industries, and we provide loans to consumers to be able to purchase everything from clothes to the latest iPhone or things like that. So, specific part of kind of the capital markets and a little bit of consumer.
Nice. Well, very happy to have you, Ashley. Now, you have a really interesting background. You're currently working in Stratfin. It looks like you started your career in investment banking. Why don't you walk our viewers through how you go from investment banking to working in Stratfin? Because even prior to Affirm, you were at a company called Really, which we can talk about in a few minutes. But just walk us through a little bit your journey from investment banking to Stratfin.
Sure. Maybe to even take it one step backwards, starting with college, I think even just jumping into investment banking was a bit of a jump for me personally. I went to a pretty small liberal arts school called Carleton College in Minnesota. So we didn't really have a big finance track or any accounting classes or business school or anything like that. So I was very intentional about wanting to jump into banking, but it was a bit of a jump for sure. So I jumped into baking because I wanted to kind of get a bit of a like finance boot camp for the lack of that in my college education, and I knew that it would set me up well for just like a lot of different opportunities within the finance world. I was a generalist at a middle market bank, so covered a little bit of everything, got to try a little bit of everything, which was really fun to see what I clicked with and what I didn't click with. And for sure, for me, it was consumer and real estate were the two kind of like things that stood out.
Okay.
And I think real estate because of the debt component attached to just like the industry in general and the like there's just like a lot of complexity on the debt side. I think that was really interesting as well. So did that, tried it out for a little bit, but then I really wanted to go a bit deeper and kind of really focus in on like one specific business rather than like juggling a bunch at any given time, like the banking role entails. So from there, I tried a couple different roles, a couple different industries actually, at different stage startups. So everything from like seed off the ground to like a larger series B and everything in between. So it was like a lot of trial and error for sure. And I think just kind of in each of those experiences, I learned a lot. And I think sometimes you learn what you like by learning what you don't like. And um, yeah, I would say that is kind of the path that I took, always with some strategic element and always with some finance element, but
Cool.
pretty much broad otherwise.
Cool. I'm going to interrupt just really quickly. So when you said you jumped from when you moved from investment banking, I'm just taking a look at your LinkedIn, two different sort of like industries right after. What was the
Sorry,
trigger?
Sue, you cut out for a second. Could
Oh,
you say
sorry.
that one more time?
Yeah. Y- uh, as you left investment banking and moved to the next role, what was the trigger? I know you mentioned that you wanted to go and work at a company. Um, uh, what then made you think like, oh, cool, like I'll leave advisory and I'm gonna go and work for a company? What was
Mm,
the catalyst to that thought? And then the second question would be, um, what skills or what sort of like tactics did you use to convince somebody hiring you that you would be a good operator, uh, even though you've spent the last few years in advisory? Because that's something that a lot of our
yeah,
candidates um, get asked all the time.
yeah. So I think my situation was very specific. So before I had taken on the investment banking job, I was actually debating between that and a different role. So I kind of already had this pretty unique opportunity that I kind of was like back of mind for me. And so I really wanted to give the investment banking thing a try. But there was kind of like this other offer on the table that I was fortunate enough to have. And so, um, as I said, I went to college in Minnesota, super cold in the winters. I'm from California. So I studied abroad quite often. And one of those winters, I interned for a really small startup back then. They had just launched a Y Combinator, like 5 people working out of a, like classic startup vibes in San Francisco type thing. Then they were, super successful in the coming years. And so they asked me to come back. And it was really that experience where I kind of contributed super early on before they had much that they welcomed me back when the company was a bit bigger for like a full-time opportunity. So that was like the first entry point kind of back into the ops side of things. And
Okay.
I didn't really even think about that till you said that. So it's a really good question.
Well, let me just hone in a little bit, if you don't mind. What do you think um, was more important? Was it the fact that you were there before, or was it now that you were an investment banker that brought you back? And was this at Servata?
Yeah. So I would say I think they're called Upwave now,
Okay.
but they're rebranded. But I think it really depends. Like I think there are folks that are looking for that experience, but I would say like the genuine connection that I had with the team
Okay.
is probably what was more of a factor. I mean, they offered me the position prior to the banking experience, so I don't really think that was like a huge factor for them personally. But I will say because of my banking experience, I think when I went back, there was definitely a little bit more of like a capital markets fundraising component just to like play to my experience and strengths.
Perfect. Win-win. Cool. So then, okay, walk. Sorry, you can. I know I interrupted you. Continue from there and all the way to being a Stratfin person.
Yeah, so I guess I just like tried a lot of different things, and to be honest with you, like a lot of things just didn't really stick or I wasn't super passionate about, and so um, they weren't super long periods of time. But I think through that experience, I kind of figured out what I was really interested in, what my strengths were, and I think fast forward to really, I wanted to experience like a little bit more mature of a startup because I think that the strategic finance function, it can be quite different depending on the like size of the org and the maturity of the org.
Yep.
And I just wanted a little bit more momentum, to get going in what we were doing there in the strategic finance role. So I want to go a little bit later stage, and really was a prop tech startup. And I think, again, like it had a lot of things that I really liked, like the debt component, the real estate component, the consumer component. So that's kind of like what made me interested in it. And then as I spent time there, I wore a lot of different hats there. I would say I started more in like a capital markets type role, but I did a lot of operations as well and a little bit of kind of like treasury, cash management, things like that, and fundraising as well. So I think it evolves depending on the company's needs. But the more I worked there, I realized like it was pretty cool to see like the product having a super finance um, focused element behind it, even if it was like behind the scenes. Like the product that we built was it's called a trade-in or a cash offer, which you might have heard of before. HomeLight now has the same product, but it's really like a capital markets product on the back end. And so that was really cool for me to be able to participate in and understand, like, because a lot of times I think product in like Silicon Valley, it's more focused on engineers and product managers
Yeah.
and things like that. But because it was like a fintech product in a lot of ways, like you can't remove the finance piece of that.
Yeah, fully agree. Working at a fintech, I very much understand when money or finance is the product. It's very different than working at an AI SaaS business or a ride
Definitely, yeah.
or as a ride sharing business. Um, although at Uber we had infinite capital, so that was very fun for us to play with.
That's yeah, there you go. That's also a really cool thing to have.
So what's like one really cool project, if you were trying to explain what Stratfin Manager does or Stratfin Pro does at really, like what's a cool project that you could share maybe in like 30 seconds to 6 seconds on just, um, uh, how a Stratfin person there really helped a business decision or change company perspective or something like that.
Yeah, I think it really it was a lot of fun because I think there were like a lot of different opportunities to get involved in all parts of the business, and probably like building that trade in product was one of the most interesting and like biggest learning parts of my career so far. What it really is like three real estate transactions in one. And so there's a lot of different like loan components. There's the transaction details from a real estate perspective, from like the legal side and contracts and things like that. So really just like getting into the weeds of like the formula, so to speak, I guess, behind the product. And then once we kind of had that down, cleaning up processing the ops to be able to scale that and grow that. That was pretty cool to see. And also understanding like the access to lenders and different like funding options at different stages of that kind of trajectory. It did change, and the more success we had and the more track record we had access to better and better capital, cost of funding, things like that. So I would say that was probably like one of the most interesting. It's a lot of corp dev, a lot of like strategic operation work, and then
Yep.
also a lot of like capital markets. And then as that kind of we got past that first bit, it turned into a lot of like okay, cash management, working capital management, things like that.
Yeah, it seems like from that project you had like the perfect background, like starting in investment banking, then doing some operations and strategy work, and then as you joined, really the big projects all used all of the background you had. Um, so a lot of people who are viewing this will probably want to be breaking into Stratfin. What are some tips you have for folks who want to sort of break into a career path similar to yours? Like you were very creative and structured about your background, right? So you went from investment banking, then did some operations, and then made the move to Stratfin, and you're till today leveraging all of that. Um, what sort of tips would you have for people looking to break in today?
Honestly, like I super appreciate the nice words, but that is totally the narrative, right? Like that's the story that I tell to make a cohesive kind of like sequencing event, but
Right.
it
It,
was
life,
definitely
otherwise
not
life.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Life just happens,
So
right?
I think my advice would be like find your like story and piece together like what you have unique to your experience or background and start to create that and really focus on the why of like each career step that you take, but also embrace like the ugliness and the truth of it and don't expect it to just be like perfect because my experience definitely wasn't perfect, but I choose to try to focus on like the positive parts because there's a ton of positive parts. But the thing that I didn't mention yet is like that company really, we ended up shutting down. It didn't work out. So learned a ton, super valuable, but it was a really painful and difficult experience, like in the midst of all of that. And I thought that was also a really good experience to have is to go through like the wind down of a company, and that was pretty tough. So I think just kind of like embracing the challenges, like it feels pretty bad in the moment, but again, like if you take a step back, you can look back on it and kind of like piece together a positive story in a way that works for you. Um, but yeah, I would say just really focus on the why and the people. Like, why are you doing this? And then what are your strengths? Like, how can you, based on your strengths, be the biggest asset that you can be to your team? Even if it's not, like what the person in the seat prior to you might have done or what you think their focus at the company might be, you'd be surprised. Like, strategic finance has a lot of wiggle room, I think, to be creative. People say people in finance are creative, but I think you can be very creative if you just think about things the right way, if that makes sense.
I love it. I like to think people in finance are creative, but you're right. There's a lot of room for creativity, and almost the more creative you are, the more you could probably unlock with some of the work you do. Um, a really quick note on really, yeah, they say when you experience learning like that, you learn a lot when um, you see things of what to do and what, in this case, maybe not to do. So I'm sure you've taken some of those learnings
Sorry, Zoo,
to.
you cut out again.
Oh,
One
sorry.
more time.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back.
Oh,
Sorry.
cool. I
Yeah.
was I wanted to touch on really on and say that you probably saw a lot of the things of maybe what not to do or how market timing or how especially working with debt facility lenders and things like that. You probably learned a lot. I know at Element when I was there, we had our ups and downs too. So there's always learnings when the companies are growing and even when companies are struggling. So I definitely appreciate that.
Yeah, definitely.
Um, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was just saying I totally agree with you, and like you can just think of it as a positive experience or value to kind of like your personal goals and what you're hoping to get out of it, even if like most people perceive it to be negative.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Two more questions for you, and then we can wrap up. I know we're at time. First question would be: what are some hard skills you would recommend people focus on that want to break into StratFin?
Hard skills like technical skills.
Yeah, like technical skills.
I think there is, especially like if you want to work in debt, like I think there's like a bare minimum and there's like certain words and vocabulary that folks use. So I think just kind of like embracing that and learning as much as you can is good. But I really think it like depends on each individual's strengths. Like if you're really interested in learning how to do things like write code for things like SQL and data queries and like on the back end of like the data manipulation stuff, there's like a ton of value that you can add for that part of the org. But if you're more like focused in on kind of like digesting the numbers and the output and then providing like strategic takeaways, I think there are different skills that you can develop there. But I think just really like going where you're interested in and willing to go super deep in is probably like the advice I would give rather than like any one thing, if that makes sense, but still understand and be aware of like the requirements of the job and the industry and what people are expecting so that you can kind of like get through the door and make sure that you're checking the box on those things. But
Right.
like for that next level of like standing out or being like a super strong contributor to your team, I would say play to your strengths for sure and your interests.
Gotcha. So get the bare minimum, and then definitely try and play to your strengths and what you
Yeah.
like and what you enjoy. Cool. What's one thing you do not like about strategic finance?
I think it's pretty broad. So, and it looks quite different at a lot of different organizations. So, sometimes I think like the expectations can be a bit broad as well,
Okay.
especially at like smaller, earlier stage startups and things like that. It's not a super well defined function. I think sometimes people are like FP&A, you do this, accounting, you do this, but then strategic finance is sometimes like a catch-all for everything else that's kind of like under finance and the CFO org, but maybe like, doesn't have a clear owner already. So I think just like sometimes that can be quite different and then also be hard to understand like what you are supposed to be focusing in on. It's especially if the org is changing rapidly or growing really rapidly, like that could also change very rapidly. So I think just like defining a clear scope, sometimes that's really hard within strategic finance.
Cool. Yeah, you're right. It's a very big net Stratfin covers, which is probably one of the reasons it's making the role so attractive for folks. It's like almost like a CEO style hat.
It's good and bad, like it's
Yeah.
kind of like you can be creative and you can like push in certain directions, but if you don't know like what you're interested in or where you can add value, no one's just going to be like this, do this. It's going to be more like you need to think of that a little bit yourself, figure out those things, and kind of like propose a path forward if that's something that you want. So, good and bad.
Yep.
Difficult if you're early in your career, I think sometimes. Yeah.
Yes, probably is. Well, Ashley, thank you very much. We're really happy to have you. I'm sure the viewers would have loved everything you said, and they probably learned a lot. So, really appreciate your
Mm-hmm.
time, and yeah, we look forward to staying connected with you.
Thank you for having me.
See you later.
Appreciate it.
All right.